Epic Universe is real, and it's almost officially open. There's already a lot of discourse starting to unfold around the park and all the rides within it, but I want to take a step back and talk about the park from a high level, or in this case, a bird's eye view. The way a theme park is laid out is something so basic and essential that it almost seems trivial, but every single aspect of your day at a park is influenced by it. There's so much thought and planning that goes into a park's layout, and over the years, parks have experimented with new styles to better fit the needs of guests. But I think Epic Universe may have perfected it for the modern era. So I promise we will talk about Epic Universe more soon, but in my usual fashion, I do want to give some backstory and context for how we ended up here. But speaking of that, I did want to see if you guys wanted me to do a more general, less scripted video about my thoughts on Epic in detail. If you do, if that's something you're interested in, let me know. If not, don't worry. I will make video essays about Epic Universe no matter what, so you'll still get more content about Epic from me. With that out of the way, let's jump back to the layout of parks before Disneyland changed everything. Parks of the early 20th century had weird, kind of sprawling layouts. This was pretty obviously due to the fact that these parks were not really designed with any intention and just grew over time. This meant that a lot of parks followed this natural sprawling layout that really ended up with these organic shapes that were reminiscent of public parks at the time. They had multiple entrances, or in most cases, not even a true entrance since rides were on a pay-per-ride basis. This is why when Walt Disney was in the early stages of the Disneyland project, he looked beyond existing amusement parks to create something that was elevated beyond what was currently offered.
Now we want you to share with us our latest and greatest dream. That's it, right here. Disneyland, seen from about 2,000 feet in the air and 10 months away. I want to tell you about it because later on in the show you'll find that Disneyland the place and Disneyland the TV show are all part of the same. Now on a site of 240 acres near the city of Anaheim in Southern California, right about in here, we've begun to build Disneyland the place. We hope that it will be unlike anything else on this earth. Fair, amusement park, an exhibition, a city from the Arabian Nights, metropolis from the future. In fact, a place of hopes and dreams, facts and fancy, all in one.
Walt and his Imagineers looked at Disneyland as more of a small city than an amusement park. They wanted to find a form that would meet the needs of a city. This meant it would have easy navigation for a large population of people unfamiliar with the intricacies of its layout, and bring them to places for entertainment, goods, and services. It also would create natural places for people to gather while hiding the essential infrastructure. They were aiming for something both incredibly thematic, but even more functional. This led them to look at cities such as Paris and its hub-and-spoke layout, which almost instantly became the shape that Disneyland would take. Its benefits were obvious to the team. It allowed for super organized guest flow that people would naturally understand and not get lost. This was doubled down on since the weenies or big visual anchors could be seen all throughout the hub, which itself had the big weenie of the castle. This layout also allowed for buildings to be placed on both sides of the pathways, balancing out the lands while hiding infrastructure. However, hub and spoke is a bit misleading, since it does have an outer ring of paths that can be used to even more efficiently navigate the park and bypass the hub when going between neighboring lands. So it's less of a hub and spoke and more wheel. Once Disneyland opened, it was obvious that the layout was a massive success, even if guests were sinking into the paths that made it up. But the layout and how the lands shaped off of it were game changers to say the least. Guests had fallen in love with the lands throughout the television series leading up to the grand opening, and the shape of the park guided them effortlessly to and through each. Each spoke off the hub felt like a new park being revealed to guests and created this story and immersion that changed theme parks forever. Okay, so jumping well beyond Disneyland, while it was a hugely successful layout, other parks would open, and for a variety of reasons, they needed to or wanted to experiment with the formula. Now, Disney had opened other parks in the exact same vein as Disneyland, but once they broke the Castle Park formula with Epcot, they also looked at the layout. Epcot is essentially two parks shoved together, and the front half takes a more traditional approach with a central hub. However, you did have the option to navigate it in a loop, since the whole future world was this cohesive land that could be explored in any way thematically. The back of Epcot, though, took a loop shape. While this had undoubtedly been used prior to Epcot, this was really its debut on a large scale for a theme park. For World Showcase, the Loop was a perfect fit. Forcing guests to travel from country to country around the lagoon made guests feel like they were themselves taking a trip around the world. This layout was so easy a caveman could navigate it, and guest flow could be highly efficient as long as the pathways are wide enough. A pitfall for the Loop is that because you're forcing guests to go from land to land, there needs to be a good transition between each. World Showcase accomplishes this easily since the whole theme of the land is travel, so jumping from country to country feels natural. But without an effort put into land borders, Loop parks can easily feel disjointed. Even further beyond Epcot, Disney and Universal stumbled upon another major bucket of theme park layouts, but more so by accident this time. I like to call these the Whoops parks because they were designed with a very different functionality in mind, and they've evolved into something different. Obviously, this is Universal in Hollywood, Hollywood Studios, and Universal Studios Florida. All parks that try to combine working studios and parks, leading to grid patterns, backlots, and just weird dead ends as they've evolved their parks into their current iterations. The modern theme park is drastically different from the park that opened in Anaheim in 1955. Perhaps the biggest change we've seen started in 2010 with the opening of the Wizarding World at Islands of Adventure. The idea of land centered around a singular IP with the goal of fully immersing guests into the source material has become the standard for theme parks since Hogsmeade. This has added some challenges to parks as they try to implement lands that attempt to bring guests directly into the movies. It can be really hard to build land transitions between singular IP lands, and guests are often having to suspend their disbelief as they move from one land to another. I think the most egregious example of this is the transition between Galaxy's Edge and Toy Story Land. I think that one makes the Tomorrowland to Fantasyland transition seem smooth. But another challenge of single IP land parks is that it makes it hard to create this cohesive overall park theme. Modern parks feel like they're collections of lands and not easily defined by their central theme as they were previously. This lack of cohesion can make every park feel somewhat the same and harder to differentiate. Only so many parks can have the general theme of taking you inside your favorite movies. The last challenge that modern parks face is that it's difficult to update and expand. Single IP lands don't fit amazingly into existing park layouts because their whole goal is isolation. So how do you achieve isolation in a layout that's designed to move guests easily from land to land? Well, you have long pathways and you try to slowly work away the theme, but that isn't really an ideal solution and it lessens the impact of entering the lands. But over time, parks have gotten better at implementing these modern lands into their existing parks. I think for me, the first big leap in this was Diagon Alley at Universal Studios Florida. There, they had themed the front of the land that existed already in the park to London, which blended in seamlessly with all the city-based facades and sets of the original park, but then created a hidden entrance to Diagon Alley along the facade. Hiding the real land on an offshoot path attached to the original layout gave Diagon Alley this isolation and immersion that it needed to work. It also divorced it from the rest of the park so it thematically didn't stick out as much. Granted, the theme of Universal Studios Florida was already much more fitting for a land like this. But nevertheless, this strategy seemed to show a progress on how Universal approached these type of lands. Disney also was taking notes, and I think Pandora achieved this isolation and thematic integration successfully because of Animal Kingdom's overgrown and exploration nature before its addition. Pandora is a hike to get to from any of the other lands in Animal Kingdom, and with the foliage, it just hides itself in plain sight, making it feel more natural that you stumble upon another world while exploring your own. At the same time, Disney has struggled with trying to turn Hollywood Studios into their single IP land park. The park just wasn't designed for that, so you get this awkward layout and weird transitions between lands. You also get this weird overlap of properties between the lands as additions happened over time, like the 3 distinct areas in Hollywood Studios that have Star Wars theming. All things considered, I do love a lot of the additions to the parks since singular IP became the norm. But that doesn't mean that there aren't trade-offs that I think are noticeable not just to people within the theme park community, but also the average guest. So now we're at Epic Universe, which is the first new theme park we've gotten in the United States since 2001. So that obviously made it the first new theme park to be designed with single IP lands in mind. So what things did Universal take from the evolution of older theme parks and apply to Epic? Well, for starters, they stole from themselves. They knew that they wanted a park that would perfectly house 4 completely immersive lands. They wanted to recreate the isolation that they had achieved with Diagon Alley and build a park around that idea. In essence, each portal is just walking through the wall into Diagon Alley. And without the success of it, I don't think Epic Universe is at all built like it is today. Beyond themselves though, Universal looked at Disney's most recent park over in Shanghai. When Shanghai Disneyland opened in 2016, it looked to evolve the castle park concept while keeping the overall feel intact. And a key part of this was drastically expanding the hub to nearly double the size of the one at Magic Kingdom. Instead of a hub, it's much more of a land called the Gardens of Imagination. This land is mainly garden and park space, but it also did take both Dumbo and the carousel out of Fantasyland and put them into the hub instead. This expanded hub is a unique feature for Shanghai, and it makes the park feel much more unique and atmospheric than a lot of castle parks. The hub isn't just used to transition between lands, it's meant to hold people. Epic also looked back even further in Disney history because I kinda lied earlier. When Disneyland opened, it had almost complete land separation. You had to go back through the hub to go from Tomorrowland to Fantasyland, or Fantasyland to Frontierland. Now, Frontierland and Adventureland had a slightly connected area, but it wasn't really intended to be used by guests to bypass the hub. But very shortly after, Disney began to add attractions like the Matterhorn between the lands, creating the outer ring of the park. Now you might be thinking, why didn't these fully isolated lands work for Disneyland at opening? Honestly though, I don't know if the decision to connect the outside of the park was necessarily due to the issues in the park layout, or if it was just space that was there for new rides to be placed, and it just wasn't as thought out as we might have expected it to be. Plus, the lands weren't nearly as specific as modern theme park lands, which made it less jarring to build these kind of transitional areas between them. Every land at Disneyland exists in some sort of fantasy, so the suspension of disbelief between lands is simpler compared to going from Star Wars to Toy Story. But I do think there probably were signs that guest flow issues could arise with the small hub and having to cross between it to go between lands, and that made it an easier sell for a ring connecting the park all around the outside. So after a few years, Disneyland and theme parks as a whole left the fully isolated hub and spoke layout behind, until Epic. So what makes Epic Universe different then to make this theme park layout work? For starters, the lands are much larger than that of the average theme park. Even the smallest land at Epic Super Nintendo World is just barely smaller than Pandora at Animal Kingdom. That doesn't even factor in that Nintendo's this weird 2-story land either. Isle of Berk and Ministry of Magic are both massive lands, Ministry being just smaller than Galaxy's Edge, and Berk being even larger. These lands trap guests because of their size and hold them there, naturally discouraging them from jumping from portal to portal like how people bounce around theme parks now. With just the one way in and one way out, this design is needed to not cause too much congestion in those pathways. Instead of making it easier for guests to move around, they made it easier for guests to stay in a land. But that's nothing compared to what I really think will make this layout work at Epic, and that's Celestial Park. I can't say enough of how critical Celestial Park and its execution is to making Epic Universe feel like the ultimate modern theme park. For starters, the land is huge. It takes up roughly 26 acres, which, for context, the next largest land is Berk at 13. The land is gigantic, and it feels like that. The scale of it really does make it a hub and a gathering place, and not just a way to get from land to land like so many other theme park hubs feel. This ties back to the whole keeping guests from jumping between portals thing. It takes time to go between portals, so it seems like too much effort to run from Donkey Kong to Cirque, and then back to Mario Kart when you could just stay a little bit longer in Nintendo. Celestial Park also acts like a trap when people do decide to jump between portals. It has quick service stands, bars, shops, and benches literally everywhere, and they're just tempting guests to take their time and stay in the hub longer than you would at any other theme park. Speaking of the food and drink options in Celestial Park, it's actually crazy how many places there are. This one land has 2 table service restaurants, 8 quick service restaurants, 3 bars, and a couple other spots with soda, pretzels, and churros that aren't even marked on the app. And these aren't small quick service windows, they're full-on restaurants with table delivery and tons of seating. Each of the portals only has 3 to 4 dining options within it, which really makes the 13 plus in Celestial Park stand out. Celestial also has rides itself to keep people around. Not just any rides either. Constellation Carousel might just be a carousel, but it's executed to perfection. It's the definition of taking a standard flat ride and plussing it up to the level of the park around it. The design, lighting, music, and the more teacup style spinning really makes the ride unique and something that I don't think people will be as apt to skip over, unlike Prince Charming's Carousel at Magic Kingdom. Then you have Stardust Racers, which just dominates the skyline and gives this gorgeous kinetic energy to the park, all while being 2 of the best coasters in the world racing each other. This isn't just a filler ride to put in the hub to give it something to do. This is a major e-ticket attraction that is one of the park's headliners. To me, this is beyond Disney putting the Great Movie Ride and Spaceship Earth inside of the park icons. Stardust is just a different level of investment into a ride in a hub land, and it didn't have to be there. Now, the one real downside of Celestial Park's design right now has been talked about a lot, and yeah, it needs shade, like a lot more shade. There's a ton of space in Celestial Park for people to rest and relax, but without shade, it gets hot and will only be worse in the summer. Now, it is important to remember that trees need time to mature, especially in Florida soil. It's really difficult to transplant large trees successfully, especially considering that there was a ton of construction also going right next to where the trees are being planted. So I fully understand why Universal went with the less risky option and planted a little bit less mature trees, and knowing they're going to grow into the space eventually. In the meantime though, and also in some areas where there aren't trees at all to grow in, I do think some additional shade structures would go a very long way and can still look good and fit into Celestial Park as a whole. Think about like the entrance to Celestial Park has all this beautiful shade and covering. You can continue that aesthetic throughout the rest of the land. Now, the good news is that shade is probably one of the easiest things to add into a park after it's already open and operating. So I hope that we see that from Universal soon and can really help alleviate some of the issues that Celestial Park faces from that right now. The only other negative sentiment I've seen towards Celestial right now is its lack of entertainment. But if I'm being honest here, I can't really relate. Throughout my times at Epic Universe, I've stopped for fountain shows, moving statues, live bands, postcards, and poems, all of which I've genuinely enjoyed and added much more to my day than I expected them to. Can they expand on this entertainment? Yeah, of course, and I'd love to see it be even more thematically tied to the land too. But is it the barren wasteland that some people are making it out to be right now? Not in my experience. So how Celestial Park sits into Epic Universe's physical layout is what I think is key to making this modern theme park layout work at an operational level. But there's a whole other aspect at play here. Theme parks are called theme parks for a reason. They go beyond just rides and bring together an experience that takes you out of your normal day-to-day life and into a different world. However, with these single IP lands becoming the norm, a lot of parks have seemed to lose touch with that one overarching theme beyond just brands. Celestial Park on the surface bucks the trend of new additions to theme parks being directly pulled from IP. This is true, but it's within that lack of brand that the rest of the park comes together in a shockingly cohesive way to me. In combination with the layout of the park, the theme of Celestial Park is an oasis between the worlds of your imagination that all exist in reality. Thematically, Celestial sits as a land between lands, which is kind of a cheat code, but also building a brand new theme park for the first time in 2 decades, I'm okay with you using that cheat code. Celestial Park is this unique land that is set in a contemporary timeline no matter what year it is. From my understanding, the land's story is that when guests are travelers dare to dream beyond their own world, the portal through the Chronos opens and Celestial Park is out in front of them. Celestial Park then allows them to jump through portals to other worlds and times that exist in their imaginations and in this reality. This means that everything that exists before present day and after present day, in fiction and in reality, is reality here, and Celestial Park's the gateway to all those lands and a gathering place for those who dare to dream. So all that kind of marketing talk out of the way, essentially Universal not only found a way to make time travel canon in their new theme park, they found a way that basically any brand whatsoever could thematically fit into the park. But then Universal extended this theme into Stardust Racers, being this celestial form of transportation that takes you across the cosmos. And the flux capacitor is just kind of a part of it. Honestly, as a huge Back to the Future fan, a little tangent here, I've been conflicted on it since we found out that the flux capacitor is on the back of the trains on Stardust. And it's nice to see it, but at the same time, it's like when there's not much Back to the Future in the parks right now, it's kind of weird. And I know people have like tried to make it like retcon into the story a bit more, and I don't know if it necessarily makes much sense. So it's nice to see it, but it just feels kind of strange. But yeah. But beyond Stardust, this kind of oasis feel to Celestial Park really gives you this time to process each land as you pass through. And this is only emphasized by the scale of the land itself. Because there's physically no way to quickly go from portal to portal, Celestial Park forces you to process each land that you just experienced. This is something that I really realized with one of my friends. She left Harry Potter and the Battle at the Ministry, and through Celestial Park, I saw her try and fail to process that ride as we very slowly made our way into Dark Universe. It's just such a perfect balance of theme and design, forcing guests to experience a park in a way that benefits each individual land and the park as a whole. The whole point of a modern theme park land is to take you out of this world and place you directly into your favorite movies and brands. This relies so heavily on the reveal when you enter the land itself. And so with Celestial Park acting as this sort of palate cleanser, that reveal for each portal continues to feel fresh and not repetitive. This also benefits from the portals also serving as the weenies for the lands. There's no need to risk ruining the reveal of the land by making sure you can see it from the hub, because you've made the singular entrance the thing that's drawing guests in. Walking out of Peach's castle after the portal is such a better moment than if I saw peeks of it all throughout Celestial. Going back to the overall theme of Celestial Park, I think there's something to be said about the challenge of creating a land that is both contemporary and also set in the world of time travel. I think the default expectation is to go for a steampunk or sci-fi theme and really lean into that time travel aspect of it. But what makes Celestial stand out to me is that it avoids those tropes. It seems to take a lot more inspiration from the theme park well that is the works of Jules Verne, which in turn gives it a similar look to Disneyland Paris's Discoveryland. But at the same time, it's more modern and more inspired by astrology and the stars. Celestial Park strikes this balance between inspirations that I just really love. This is also wonderfully reflected in the soundtrack of the land. There's just so much music created for this land, and it spans just so many different influences and genres, all while staying cohesive. All the music has this kind of charm to it that I can only compare to like the early Epcot soundtrack. Universal, I'm going to need you to make a vinyl of this. I know you have the Dark Universe one. Totally get that. Can't wait to buy it on opening day. When you restock it, that's my rope drop strategy. Please no one steal it from me. But I want the Celestial Park music to be behind me and be able to play it whenever I want to. That'd be really fun. And I would buy 40 of them. I don't care if it's like a 40 LP. I will buy 40 of them. As a whole, Celestial Park is the thematic glue that holds Epic Universe together, and I don't think it's getting the respect it deserves. It will have its growing pains, as all brand new theme parks have, but the foundation that Celestial provides is incredibly strong. It's a land that is truly not tied to any specific IP, and it aimed to be timeless and all-encompassing. And to me, it fully achieves this. And it does it all with this unique human touch that really makes Epic Universe so refreshing. Now, there is an elephant in the room here. The park isn't actually open yet. It's in previews with a reduced capacity and a whole bunch of locals who know their way around a theme park. This whole one way in, one way out thing could be an absolute nightmare in normal operation for all we know. But I do think the design of the portals themselves will help to mitigate this, since they, for the most part, discourage just hanging out by the portal. There's a bit of a walk between the portal and the real gathering spot of each land, with the exception being Nintendo, but even that does have a bit of a buffer. Regardless though, Universal's gonna have to make this work. Unlike opening day Disneyland, there really isn't any space between the lands to create ways between them. Universal placed all of the infrastructure and rides right on the outskirts of the lands, basically building walls between them. Even in a spot like the expansion plot between Nintendo and Dark Universe, there isn't really an easy way to connect the lands there, as that would require working around the backstage access road. I think it would take something huge for Universal to look at connecting the lands versus trying other ways to mitigate the issues at the portals themselves, like virtual lines for entering each land when they're overcrowded, but let's all hope that it never gets to that point. This whole concept working also means that expansion and replacement will have to stay in the theme of the current lands, unless Universal replaces an entire portal. Fully swapping out a land is actually possible in a layout like this. Just close off the portal and there's no real disruption to normal guest flow. All the construction kind of exists in its own little world there. But I don't think Universal will be completely changing a land for a really long time, if ever. But if they did find themselves in that spot, it'd be easier than swapping out a land in one of their current parks. The more immediate benefit from this is that new rides and expansions will have to fit into the current lands that we have. This really should help maintain the theme of each portal and avoid lands being forgotten over time. You really can't have a situation like the Lost Continent where the land loses its theme over time, first by losing some of its land to a new neighbor, and then the closure of a show, and then the closure of an attraction with no replacement in sight. You can't really get that here. Universal has an incentive to maintain, upgrade, and reinvest in not just the lands themselves, but also the properties they reflect. I love seeing how to Train Your Dragon is getting this resurgence and the love it deserves because of the Isla Burke at Epic. And I would wager a guess that the timing of Epic and the live-action remake of the movie is no coincidence here. Universal used to be a company that was known for having no nostalgia and axing rides without caution, but Epic will force them to think differently, and I'm really excited about that. Ultimately though, time will tell whether or not this layout is successful and the game changer that I think it is. But I have a ton of hope for its success. I think the structure, the layout, and theme of Epic Universe, and how Celestial Park ties it all together physically and thematically, will make Epic Universe the theme park of the future that Universal hopes it is. Thank you so much for watching. I genuinely can't believe that Epic Universe is like almost officially open and that I've been to it. It honestly literally feels like just yesterday they announced that like the park was even being built. So to be here talking about my experiences and my thoughts in it is kind of crazy. But yeah, if you want that more like general video where I talk about my thoughts on Epic as a whole, let me know. It's not really my usual style of video, but it's also a brand new theme park opening. And if people want my thoughts, I'm more than happy to share. If you don't, I will still have more Epic focused videos coming either way. I really just want to be in that park at all times at this point. I also tried something different with my mic for this one. We'll see if that sounds better. It's easier for me than putting a lav on. It's a different style. We'll see how it sounds, but let me know if you like that or I should go back to the lav. Either way. I also do just want to take a moment and say thank you. I made this channel a little over a year ago now, and I never would have expected to find a community and people who have similar interests to me so fast. All of the support you guys have really given me has made such an impact, and I'm really grateful for it. Yeah, if you want to keep up with me, I'm gonna keep making videos. I really enjoy this. It's been a ton of fun. So keep up with me, subscribe, follow, Twitter, Instagram, all that. And I'll keep making videos, and I'll see you next time.
Well, you know, it's tradition to always throw back like the first catch, so I'm just gonna let him go home with his family. Be free!